it's me, MLB. Here is Future Special Chapter number 4, and this one is titled Labour Pain Stimulator. This little skit is about hooking Shoto, Katsuki, and Ichiro up to the pain labour simulator. I am so sore. I feel like I've been kicked repeatedly in the vag for like a year, Jem sighed. I can't still sit down properly with these stitches in my nether region, Mrs. Bakugo chimed in. You and the girls were having a catch-up at the Bakugo residence and basically having a whinge about anything pregnancy or baby related. And I bet the boys think it's easy being a mum, or easy going through labour for that matter, Mrs. Bakugo added. Someone needs to hook them up to a labour pain simulator thing or something, you said. Actually, Mrs. Bakugo said with a devious grin, I have a TENS machine that could do the trick. Why do you have a... Okay, you know what? I'm not even going to ask, Jem said with a laugh. No, but seriously, let's have some fun with them, you quipped. I'd love to see how they handle it. Okay, $10 says my husband claims he's going to have the best pain threshold and is going to be the first to cop out, Mrs. Bakugo said with a laugh. Okay, bet, you and Jem said in unison. You each texted your husbands and organised the time when they would all be free for a little experiment. Okay, girls, what's the experiment? Kiri asked excitedly as he entered the room, with Bakugo and Shoto following behind him. Well, Mrs. Bakugo said with a glint in her eye, we want to see which one of you would last the longest on a labour pain stimulator device, she said. Easy, Bakugo snorted. I'll win hands down. You both owe me $10, Mrs. Bakugo said, turning to you and Jem. Wait, what? You bet on me? Bakugo asked, stunned. Yep, because I knew that you'd say that, she added with a giggle. Yeah, well, you know me too well, he sneered. You are my soulmate after all. Did you have a second part of the bet where he would be the first to cave too? Shoto asked Mrs. Bakugo as he took a seat beside her. Yeah, actually, she laughed. Bakugo growled. You're too predictable, Bakugo. Shoto leered slyly. Or am I your soulmate too? Shut it, you half and half bastard, he seethed. Okay, he laughed. So who wants to go first? I will, Kiri volunteered, suspiciously happy. Does he even know what he's getting himself into? You wondered. You set up the bed on the floor for him to lie on and pulled his shirt up. Oh, damn those abs. You got the gear, babe? You asked Mrs. Bakugo. Right here, she said, kneeling beside you and placing the pads on the lower portion of his abdominals. Okay, we'll start with a mild contraction, she said, turning the machine on. She adjusted the dial and pressed start. Kiri winced, and slightly, but he held it together pretty well. It's uncomfortable, he said. Okay, let's go for medium then, Mrs. Bakugo said, turning it up to 5. Oh, yeah, okay, that's... He gritted his teeth and squeezed his eyes shut as a small groan escaped his throat. Are you okay, babe? You asked him. He just nodded and breathed heavily through his nose. And here comes a slightly stronger one this time, Mrs. Bakugo said, flicking the dial up 2 notches. Yeah! Okay, out! Oh! Kiri yelled. Bakugo was in fits of laughter, and Shoto just looked worried. Okay, give me a shot, Bakugo said confidently, as Mrs. Bakugo turned the machine off and took the TENS pads off Kiri's body. The poor redhead hopped up off the mat, tail between his legs, and slunk over to a chair to caress his guts. Bakugo was already being hooked up by the time that you turned around, and Shoto was sporting an interesting look on his face. You didn't quite know how to interpret it, but it looked like he was going to enjoy what was in store for Bakugo. Hit me. Go with a 5, Bakugo said, self-assuredly as he locked his eyes with his wife. Are you sure it's pretty? Do it, he demanded. Okay, she said with resignation as she dialed it up to 5 and hit the on button. Bakugo's face contorted, and he went as white as a sheet before screaming bloody murder. He hollered, profanities well and truly unleashed. The contraction eased, and Mrs. Bakugo went to turn it up one more click, but his death grip on her arm and strong eye contact demanded he be released now. She sniggered as she took the equipment off him and sent him slinking back to his seat. Shoto looked very satisfied with the results of Bakugo's round and stepped forward for his turn. "Start me on a 2, please," he said politely. "Piss weak," Bakugo snorted. Shoto ignored him. He survived level 2 easily and made his way up to level 6 before showing any signs of pain. He had tapped into his breathing early on in the experiment and was dealing well with the torturous pain. "Going up to 8 now. This is considered a strong contraction," Mrs. Bakugo said as she clicked it up 2 more notches. Shoto braced and breathed deeply, closing his eyes and focusing on relaxing as best he could. Sweat was starting to bead on his forehead, but he still hadn't made any sound. Kiri and Bakugo were on the edges of their seat watching. He survived another round and then was pushed to level 10. "This is the pain of childbirth," Mrs. Bakugo said as she prepared the machine for the maximum currency. "Ready?" she asked Shoto. He nodded. She hit start and his head snapped back against the floor, the most animalistic roar escaping his body, and everyone was shocked into silence. "Sho!" Jem called. "Do you want out?" "No!" he roared. "Keep it going till the end." 10 seconds and counting, Mrs. Bakugo said calmly as she watched to watch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. She flicked the machine off and everyone in the room let go of the breath that they were inadvertently holding. Jem jumped up and ran to Shoto's side. "Are you okay?" she asked with grave concern. "Yeah," he panted. "I just wanted to see what you went through, so I could appreciate you more," he said while wincing and sitting up. All the women's hearts in the room melted, and Kiri and Bakugo felt bad, but the experience was well worth it, because all the men had 10 times more respect for their ladies from that day forwards, and Mrs. Bakugo was a little bit richer too, from winning the bet. And there ends that one. I'll see you next Wednesday for the next special chapter.